And that is started right now. So welcome to you all, and this is the second phase of our NOC webinar, second NOC webinar in the year. So as we said earlier, we yesterday discussed campus wireless, and all the discussion was around deployment, around how to place your network infrastructure, the best practices therein, and any troubleshooting that. And we as well shared our experiences with the members and everyone around. So we also picked some concerns and some tools that the members actually shared with the rest of the group. And I want to believe the webinar was successful. So for those that missed yesterday's session, I saw an email from Ibrahim from Ebenezer. The session yesterday was recorded, and similarly, we shall share the presentations and recording with you all. We have also today, we have a session today to discuss new topics, two topics. One, basic troubleshooting for services, especially RENU services and any other services that you have. You have several servers that give you particular services in your institutions. Maybe they may not be hosted by RENU, but these are similar best practices that we want to cover in this. We also have, in the second phase of this discussion, a topic that I want to believe is critical to everyone here, bandwidth management and optimization, and we shall have a discussion around there. How do we manage these resources, especially where do we start from? So in this discussion as well, after today's session, we shall also have an engagement with everyone here, and we shall share our experiences, because these are things that we deal with on a daily, and we have as well very experienced people that have experience and have worked with these services for a long time, and they can share a thing or two with the other people that possibly have just joined the ecosystem. So today we have a presentation and the facilitator, Daniel Kauma from the systems teams and cybersecurity. So I want to believe he's already with us, and he will share his screen and a presentation to take us through the first phase of this discussion. So allow me welcome Daniel Kauma to kickstart our first phase of this discussion today. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Daniel, as already explained by my colleague, and we'll be taking us through the first session. This is basically going to be about troubleshooting, literally. We tend to look at things in a general way. Troubleshooting is one of the hardest tasks when it comes to any engineer's job, if I may say. It is always very interesting when everything is running well until that time when things stop running. And you're like, yesterday it was working, what happened? So now we are here to look at maybe how best can we go about that kind of scenario. So it could be, you may see that the title is literally mostly talking about server troubleshooting, but these are the same techniques we can employ and use in other given scenarios. It could be a network device, it can be a switch, it can be a router which is having an issue, but then how do we go about the entire process? So as we're going through, I hope you're able to see my screen. Are you able to see my screen? Okay, let me put it in presentation mode. All right, so we are going to be looking at troubleshooting mainly in general. Of course, we have an understanding of what this actually is. And then we're going to be looking at the common problems which we do face, the technical problems and maybe some soft problems which do come along, which could result in the failure of particular services not to behave the way they are expected. Then we shall be looking at some checklists. These ones we shall have a maintenance checklist. What do we need to have in our toolbox if we are to carry out maintenance? If it is troubleshooting, what do we need to have in our toolbox? Then we shall have a simple demo of some tools that we have commonly used on our end whenever we're doing some troubleshootings. So to start with, when we talk about troubleshooting, what we know is servers are very, very interesting. Whenever they are performing well, businesses are going to be successful. But now we are in an era where you find that data being processed is a lot. And of course, the server power has also, processing power of the servers has also been increased to some extent. So we tend to enjoy the idea of high performing servers. When we have them and everything is running smoothly, then everything is going to be okay. But then we look at a case whereby we have noticed in our daily routines, we've seen that server issues occur on a frequent basis. And whenever a server failure has happened, the results are never that friendly. You're going to be getting frustrations from the end users. The people within the institution who are consuming the service are always going to be on your neck. Why is the printer suddenly off? Why can't I maybe send email? Why is the website off? Those are the different questions that do come across. It could be the ERP system at school, maybe one which is managing the records. So anything can happen, and of course the results are always catastrophic. So there are always very, very many reasons which can result into the failure of the server. So we are going to be looking at most of these. We need to find, as technical people or as IT administrators within our respective institutions, we need to have an understanding and get to know that the reason as to which can lead to maybe failure of a particular service, they can range to a very big number of reasons. It is not always one particular source, because in most cases when something goes off, you're like, okay, maybe the person who gave me this thing is the reason it is failing. We've had those incidents whereby a person knows, okay, RENU hosts my web machine in their cloud. So the fact that I can't access the servers of that web machine, it is probably RENU. Yes, it might have been RENU, but then you need to first do a check to confirm, like, okay, what we're going to do is get a better procedure. What do I have to look out for? Because you may find that, okay, you could even solve this problem without going through like making calls, writing emails and stuff like that. You may find that you can fix this problem just locally before you can push it outside or before you can do the escalation. So several reasons can lead to a server being slow or completely failing to work as it is expected. And remember, since servers are hosting services, whenever they are experiencing any sort of weakness, slowness in performance, the services they are hosting are going to be affected. Now, some of the common problems that we have at least encountered, you can find that this list is not exhaustive. There are some other reasons you may look at these points and you're like, oh, but he hasn't talked about this. Of course, we have come across different things, and I can't actually maybe outline all of them. It's a very big range of issues. But one of the most common ones, when it comes to the hardware side of issues, it is the power outages. Because in most cases, you find that, okay, this server could have been co-located in our data center or in some other place. It could be a system within the school, which is hosted within the school internally or within the institution internally, or within the organization. And all of a sudden, it's, there are scenarios we found whereby institutions have servers running internally. This server is hosting maybe an ERP system, managing data records for patients and stuff. But then it is not put in it. They haven't designated a data center for that kind of system. It is, the server is seated on a desk. And at this desk that is like close to the reception, everyone is passing by. So all of a sudden, maybe someone knocks the cable, the power cable becomes loose, service is off. So this is now the point. That is usually the beginning point of frustration. So you're like, what has happened to the server? It has been working all along. So it could be a power outage. One of the other things we tend to look at is outdated firmware. There are incidents we have had, more so this has come with the Windows operating system. When it comes to the Windows Server operating software, you find that Windows Server maybe 2012, 2018, 2019, whenever their license expires, because on our side, when we are maybe provisioning machines in the cloud. Some member institutions do request that they want Windows servers. We do spin up the Windows servers, but of course, you know, as RENU, we do not go as far as paying for the license, which sits on that machine. The license is usually on the person or the member institution. So whenever those Windows servers are provisioned, the license is valid for at least, I think, 90 days. Initially, it's more like a trial period. But whenever the 90 days end, I think the way Windows people or Microsoft does it to remind you that you have to pay for a license, they make this machine to reboot or to shut down every hour. After every 1 hour, as long as the 90 days have gone, after 1 hour, every 1 hour, the server is going to go off. Of course, now this is going to cause frustrations on your side. You're like, what is RENU doing? What is wrong with this? So it doesn't happen only to machines we host on our side. You could have maybe had this incident within your institution, internally. If you have this Windows server and it is going off, the reason could have been the license. And once you have maybe the license restored, or once you pay for the license, you find that everything is going to normalize. So that is one of the basic examples I could give concerning the part of outdated firmware. And then on the technical side, it could be a system overload. In most cases, we do set up servers or we do set up services looking at the current load that we have as an institution. Maybe you have about 5 staff, you set up a mirror server internally, and these 5 staff, of course, what they are doing, the resources on the server are able to address or handle that load. But then with time, you find that you've recruited more people, you are now 30. So the same server which was which was addressing the requests from 5 people is now addressing requests from 30 people. So the fact that we hadn't, you set up the service without looking ahead, without like considering how the load would be, maybe in the next 5, 3 or 10 years, this becomes now an issue at this point. You find that a person tries to load a website on that particular server, it is not loading. A person tries to maybe load the web interface for the email, it is not loading. So those are the different things that can come as a result. So it could be an issue with configuration settings. Configuration settings are common. You could maybe you do an update. In most cases, we do encourage that you do apply patches. But some patches do come with extra configurations in order to rectify what they had noticed as wrong. They come with some new things. Whenever you do this installation of the patch, it may make some changes in the configuration. And whenever this change happens, if the change is not welcomed maybe by the service, you're going to find that the service maybe breaks and it is no longer accessible. So it could be any other example for a configuration issue. It could be maybe a change, you were working on something and all of a sudden maybe the port which was put for the mail service, instead of 25, we put 26. I don't know, it's for IMAP, anything can happen when it comes to the configuration part. So that is one of the other technical problems which can arise and cause issues with the servers. Then we have the point for network glitches. This happens, maybe it could be the network link goes off, and when it goes off, once it comes back on, you find that this particular server in question, now this point kind of links, okay, the example I'm trying to give kind of links to configuration settings. After the network glitch, network comes back up and the server is no longer accessible, but the server is on, the server is running. The server, when you check everything seems to be normal, but then you find that maybe in the configurations for this particular server, they configured it to be obtaining IP addresses dynamically. Someone never considered the idea that maybe it has to have a static IP address, which is the norm, actually, which is the standard for all servers. As long as we're having a server, it must be running on a static IP address. So after the network glitch, this server probably went back to the DHCP and got a different IP address. And now people were using the previous IP address to access this particular server. They can no longer access it. They can no longer reach it. So that is one of the other things. And then we also have the cybersecurity issues. These can be compromises to the server. Website has been compromised. Could be ransomware. It could be a DDoS attack. The server is receiving very many requests and can't process them at that particular time. So it can be any number of issues in relation to that. So these are the common problems when you look at servers as a whole. But then we also have websites. You are hosting your website internally, or you're hosting your website with some service provider. And then There are other issues which do literally or technically happen to the website specifically. The SSL certificates can expire. Remember, it is the SSL certificates that enable us to access a website using HTTPS. So whenever they expire, and this website was set, if I may mention this, it is very, very much recommended that you always access your website via HTTPS. And for that reason, whenever we host websites, so whenever you host your website, you as a person internally or even service providers, they tend to enforce HTTPS. So it means that even when your user puts in HTTP, it will be forcefully redirected to HTTPS. So now what would happen if the service which is responsible for HTTPS finally is not running? So that means if SSLs expire, you're not going to be able to access your website. Remember, whenever you put HTTP, it is forcefully put to HTTPS, and HTTPS is not seeing the certificate. So that is one of the other things which can happen. Domain expiry, domains expire. When we say renu.s.ug, it is a registered domain, and that means it runs for a particular period of time. For any given institution which is hosting a website, and that website is being accessed publicly from any location around the internet, it means it is running on a domain. Domains expire, and it has come to our attention that most member institutions don't have this monitoring about their domains. As long as the website is loading, you don't know when it will expire. Some don't have that information until that point when it expires and goes off. Then you start calling the service provider. You start calling and you're like, oh God, what is going on? Why is my website off? So on checking on our end, then we're like, oh, your website expired yesterday. You get the point. So domain expiry is one of the things which are so common. It happens, and we need to have a way of ensuring that we are updated. We know when it is expiring and when it is always going to be running. Configuration issues. These cut across. Of course, when you talk about configurations for the websites, this can be a number of things. Could be literally done from the admin side. A patch has been applied. Maybe some module has been misconfigured with the wrong IP address. IP addresses can be confusing. Actually, you find that instead of putting 211, you put 121. So those kind of configuration issues can break the entire internal processing for that particular service. For websites, quotas exceeding is a common issue, because you find that in most cases, web hosting is done on a quota-based basis. And whenever your quota expires, it means there are some things you're not going to be able to do. The website may load, but when you go to the admin side, you can't create a new post. You can't update the post you have. You can't maybe add a new database. So those issues can come in. And of course, whenever they come in, they send an alarm to you, like, why is my website no longer working? So I believe that after this webinar, you will be able to check. You're like, okay, is my SSLs okay? Is my domain okay? Have I made any configuration changes, like updates or what? Is my quota still fine? Then the other things we tend to have with websites is the performance. The website completely slows down, and this can be due to a number of reasons. It could be the network, the internet, when it is the issue. It could be the plugins that is loading. It could be the software which was used in developing the website. It can be a number of issues. But I believe that by the end of this presentation, you will be able to know where to go whenever you have that kind of issue. Where can I go and check? Of course, cybersecurity issues still can be here. Websites have been compromised. Websites have been hacked. Now it is no longer maybe loading. So that is also another common issue. Then still with websites, we included this slide just to give us a brief of what we usually get on our side as users. Whenever you're loading a website, there are some cases, there are some codes which are thrown within the browser. So if you're seeing the screen, you're seeing 404 is one of the common ones, 500 is one of the common ones. You may not have seen the one codes which are ranging between 200 to 299, because those ones are mostly for successful responses. That maybe the request was processed successfully. Those are internal to the server and never returned to the client. But then redirection messages, these ones happen frequently. You try to access a particular website using HTTP, and this website was internally in the server, it is redirected to HTTPS. You may get a code which is saying, maybe this website was redirected permanently. It could be 301, it could be 302, any of those particular ones. So when you see any code beginning with 300, for the errors thrown on the client side in your browser, a code beginning with 300 is trying to tell you that we are looking at a redirection challenge. Maybe what you're trying to look for was moved to another URL. It is being, so you need to be redirected to that side. Then we have errors which are working in the range of 400. These are mostly the most common ones, and 400 is talking about you are trying to access some resource and maybe that resource is not available. So we have that part where you try to access a particular URL and they're like, this resource cannot be found. It can be 401, it can be 402, it can be 403. But whenever we have something concerning 400, it means you're trying to access a resource, but that particular resource probably doesn't exist on a server. Okay, then we have 500. Now, when it comes to errors of 500 or falling in the range of 500, these are mostly server error responses. And these ones do track back to the internal service, the internal server, which is hosting that particular service. If you try to access this web application and it is saying, it is throwing an error of 500, it means internally, there is something wrong with the server. Either the server is having a configuration issue, the server is no longer running, the server cannot access the resource, the server doesn't have the right permissions. So it can be anything ranging from any of those particular reasons. And now when you look at this was a Google report for 2018, and they were just trying to show us the most common error which people tend to receive when they are loading, maybe when accessing web applications. And you find that 500 is at the top. We say it's 500. Whenever we see anything concerning 500, we are looking at the internal. We are looking at the internal server errors. 400. Actually, each of these ones has a particular meaning. I think 404 is for page not found. 403 could be the URL, the requested resource is not available. 401 was a bad request. I don't remember them offhand, but each one of these codes communicates something. So when you get a 401, it means you need to understand what exactly is it trying to communicate. Am I accessing something which is not available on the server? Is it a bad request? Like something of that kind. So these we've seen as the most common website errors of web applications in general. And then if we are to do the troubleshooting, after we have, at least now we have come to see that there is a number of reasons which can lead to disruption of service or to denial of service, which can result into failure to access a particular service. So now after noticing that, you may never know, when a service fails, you may never know what exactly led to the failure of that particular service. You may never know why you're no longer able to access your website, why you're no longer able to access that ERP system. So now that is where the checklist comes in. With the checklist, we are saying, okay, how can we do the troubleshooting? How can I look for the source of the issue? Remember, we need to find the issue if we have to solve it. So in this case, we are saying that you have to make sure as an IT admin within your institution or organization, you need to make sure that you have a troubleshooting routine, a standardized troubleshooting routine. With the troubleshooting routine, it means you set procedures and you're like, okay, whenever this happens, I'm going to check this part first. Once that part is okay, I come to this one. Once this is okay, this is where I go next. So you need to have a procedure, something to offer a guideline to show where to begin from and what is the end objective of this entire process. And at the same time, we encourage that you always start from the bottom and work your way up as you're trying to solve the issue. When we say from the bottom, if it is a server, you have it there and all of a sudden the server is not working. First of all, go to the server itself. Is the server powered? If the server is powered, then that means it's not a power outage. Power is not the issue. And once I know that power is not the issue, I have to check the connectivity. Is it a physical layer issue? Is its Ethernet cable maybe still connected? Is it still intact? So that is how we work our way up. Like you start from maybe the physical layer and then you start moving upwards. take time also in your troubleshooting and test for the connectivity. Once you confirm that it's not a power outage and the Ethernet cable is still connected, is still intact in that server, then you're going to be prompted to log into the server and confirm if the server is still able to access the internet. You log in, could be a Windows server, you open the terminal, try to send a ping outwards. Can you ping 8.8? You get the point. Can you ping the gateway? Can you ping its IP address? Does it still have the IP address? Now, those are the things now you go in to check for the connectivity issue bit. And now for this scenario, remember, we are mostly talking about a server that is physically present and you have access to it. At the same time, once you confirm that it can ping 8.8, then you may need to check the name resolution. When you talk of name resolution, now in this case, we are looking at DNS. Is it able to resolve queries? Because you may find that maybe the reason we not it is not reachable. Maybe it is it has the DNS server it is having, or it is operating or running on, or the one it is using to do resolution of queries is no longer working, has got any technical issue. So you go ahead and look at, okay, can I do resolutions with this particular DNS, which was configured for this particular server? So you open the server, you go in, you try to run some tests on how you can resolve, or on how you can test the DNS resolution. We may not typically go to dig deep into this because we have had, I think we had workshops which were mostly looking at DNS. We did setups and we did tests on how you can test if DNS is working well, stuff. We looked at most of the things. Then the other thing we do request that you consider, for now, this one comes to the case of remote access. Okay, it could be a server which you're trying to access remotely. Maybe you're using RDP, maybe you're using RENU NOC client, whichever tool you're trying to use to access that particular server remotely. So you come, if you have confirmed, for example, if it is a remote server, network connectivity would come in a way you are going to first run a ping and you see, am I able to ping this particular server? But remember, when it comes to Windows servers, pings are usually disabled by default. So a ping may not be conclusive to determine if a server is down or up. So remote access, we need to confirm, am I able to access the server? Get RDP, try to run a connection. Get your PuTTY for the terminal services, get your PuTTY, try to connect. Are you able to reach it? Those are some of the things you can look at. And now when it comes to email server issues, these ones can range from maybe the IP address of the email server has been blacklisted. The domain of the email server itself has been blacklisted. The email server is lacking some basics. You know, there are some guidelines which we consider as the baseline as far as email security is concerned. And any email server which is missing any of those particular guidelines, you'll find that it is going to be blacklisted by other email servers. It will be seen as an agent of spam, and then it is going to be blacklisted. Whenever that happens, you're going to get issues as far as the delivery of the emails is concerned to external parties. And then maybe when you come to print servers, if you're to troubleshoot now, this, of course, the servers, we do the same thing. We want to come physically. Is it on? Is it having the cable? Is it still having the IP address that was assigned to it? So those are the basics that we do look through when we choose to do troubleshooting. So it is a process. We can never know what exactly led to the disruption of service until we start the troubleshooting process. So the reason for the troubleshooting process is to identify the source of the issue. Okay. Now, when it comes to the maintenance checklist, with maintenance, we are looking at what are some of the things we need to put in place to have visibility about, so that we try to minimize the disruption that can come as a result of a service outage. So for all of this, when we say there are many reasons as to why, there are different reasons for a particular service to fail, or for a particular server to fail. So because of that, we are trying to say now, with the maintenance checklist, we're like, how can we minimize the damage caused by the downtime? How can we minimize the damage which results after the outage? So what are the things you need to put in place? What are the things you must have in place? Okay, because you may find that it is very hard to avoid an outage. but you can possibly minimize the damage which can result after that outage has happened. Because you look at a server which has maybe been fried by power. This is the only ERP system you had in the place, in the organization. It has financial records, it has user data, all that information. And all of a sudden, it has been fried. So you need to have a backup. You know, backing up is one of the things some system administrators have really taken up to do, but then they have always forgotten to do a verification of that backup. Because whenever we do backups, you need to verify that those backups really work as expected. That in case the actual server, in case the main server is out of the picture, it is compromised, and I can't get anything from it, is this backup able to put me up to operation again? So you need to always test the backups you perform. Get time, get a sample, get one particular backup, try to maybe put it on another server and see if you're able to access the services as expected. And then you should also do monitoring for the disk usage. There are several tools that can be used to do this monitoring, whereby it gives you an internal understanding. These tools can help you to understand internally how, what is the status of the resources from on this particular server. You get to know the disk usage, you get to know the CPU utilization, you get to know the RAM utilization. In case that particular server, when you look at Linux operating systems, in case swap is enabled, you get to know the utilization for the swap. So you need to monitor the disk usage, because there are servers, there are very, very many servers actually that we have seen, which have gone into kind of a panic mode whenever they get full. You find that the root partition, which is having the operating system, is full to 100%. And once it is full, it cannot process anything more. It completely shuts down the server. You can't access the server, you can't SSH, you can't access it via the console, you can't load anything on the server because of that. So if we have this monitoring, if we have the monitoring and you're able to know that, okay, the disk usage is now at 98%, it gives you that allowance to ensure that the disruption to service as a result of exceeding the disk quota doesn't happen because you have been doing the monitoring. At the same time, we have what we call RAID. In most cases, you find that this is a RAID. When we talk of RAID, we are looking at the redundant array of inexpensive disks. This happens with the servers which have more than one disk, probably 2 to 5, 6, or 10. Most of those servers, they tend, when installations are being done, you find that some people configure RAID. But now, in most cases, some RAID types have issues. You find that failure of only one disk within that RAID kind of that RAID setting or that RAID configuration, failure of one disk can result into the entire server being completely inoperable. Everything dies. So RAID alarms tend to come out early on. Now these come out from the very server themselves. So you need to have a way of monitoring the health of the server. Now, in this case, looking at the RAID alarms. In case that server is RAID enabled, you need to understand what is the status of the disks in RAID, because now those disks are the ones hosting everything on that particular server. You have to ensure that the operating system is always updated. Patches always come out. You read about this and you go ahead and apply the patches. Web applications, updating them. Of course, now here we're looking at, it could be the CMS, it could be a module you're using, Joomla, whatever, plugins, go ahead and patch these things up. Remote management. Now with the remote management, now this is to ensure that our, the devices, now in most cases when we talk about remote management, we are looking at servers that will require our attendance or our presence even when we are away. It could be when away from the institution, it could be a co-located server, it could be a cloud server, but then you need to access it on a continuous basis. But now you need to be sure the tools you put in place for accessing that particular server, are they operational? You get the point? Because you are the IT administrator, you are away from campus, and all of a sudden this particular server has an issue. Do you have means of accessing that server to restore service and reduce or minimize that downtime? Now, you need to ensure that you do the checks to ascertain that the tools which are for remote management are also available. You have to look out for hardware errors. These ones are also common when it comes to the servers. Some hardware errors can be a result of RAM chips. One RAM chip can die. You could be having like 64 GB of RAM, and maybe these are like 16 RAM chips, and then one of them dies. In most cases, hardware errors, you get alerts. The servers tend to have, the server itself has that internal health monitoring. It will be giving you a warning, and it tells you, okay, the RAM chip is having an issue. So if you don't attend to this as early as possible, you're going to find that the issue is going to escalate and cause this entire server to stop being operational. And all of a sudden, this server is out of the picture. We have an outage. Then we need to check resource utilization. Of course, I've already mentioned this as I was also highlighting out the previous parts. Resource utilization, we are looking at RAM, we are looking at maybe the swap, we are looking at DC, we are looking at virtual CPUs, processing power. And then the other things is you need to have a routine of physically inspecting the equipment. Yes, it is a server you're collocating with RENU, but when did you last visit the server? You last saw it the day you brought it. Now that is 2 years ago. So for you, like as long as it is powered, but what if there is some other issue? Because when we do these physical inspections, that is the time when we come and blow dust out. You're going to find that the CPU has been clogged with dust. It reaches a point and it is overheating and the CPU dies. The entire equipment is down. But why? You never took time to do the physical inspection. You need to make sure that you're running an antivirus on those important servers or the devices which are holding the important services. Run antivirus, make sure you can, if possible, schedule this antivirus to run maybe on a daily basis. Could be a daily basis maybe, or after every 2 days, and whenever it runs, at least let there be some kind of report which can be sent to your email to see the status, get to understand what is currently happening there. The reason we're talking about this is we have had incidents of ransomware, but ransomware doesn't happen on one day. It doesn't happen that very day you have noticed it. For you, it is the time you have noticed, but then this is a process which is started for like 2 weeks back, 3 weeks back. Guy got access, maybe he dropped the malware first. It's an executable file, but if you have an antivirus, you can know, okay, that there is something has been spotted. Go and look at it. So this can help us to prevent the issues which can come as a result of maybe not paying attention to those small details. Making sure that you review user accounts. Make sure that you review user accounts. When we talk about reviewing user accounts, now we're looking at cases whereby we have users who have left. This person was the system administrator. He was the one managing the routers, the switches. He's the guy who has access to maybe the web admin dashboard. The website is one who knows how to maybe upload content and stuff. This person leaves and the password he passed on to you, it is the same password you're still maintaining. We do encourage that at least change the passwords on a daily basis. If it is a user who was there temporarily, maybe an intern, you had given them access, disable the accounts. So this is why we're saying consider a continuous review of user accounts. For many systems, once they are deployed and they are working. Now this could be the plug and play devices. It could be a firewall, PFSense, can be Cisco firewall, so forth. Once it is plugged and it starts operational, they tend to have their default password credentials. What does that mean? You're like, as long as it is working, you don't bother to change the password. But remember, this is a possible point of entry. It is a possible vector for attack. So you need to ensure that you do change the passwords regularly for systems that are critical within the organization. Okay, then you also ensure that you check the system security. Of course, with the system security, we're talking about is it having a firewall? Is it updated? The patches, are they up to date? Is it having that antivirus as well? So those are some of the key things that you must always look out for when managing servers. So this would make the troubleshooting process easier because once you have this checklist, I know you're already that side and you're checking. For the servers you have, do they have antivirus? They have this, you reviewed user accounts. When is the last time you changed the password? When is the last time you physically inspected that equipment? When is the last time you blew dust out of that equipment? So now those are the things, those are the reasons as to why we need a checklist. And we do set up the checklist, but at the same time, we have to ensure that we enforce what is on the checklist. If it is checks which must be run after every 3 months, let it be so. Okay. So we are now going to have a look at some of the tools that we tend to use in most cases when we are troubleshooting certain issues. These ones mostly we find issues. We mentioned domain expiry for websites. We mentioned that part of performance of the websites. We mentioned also emails. So we are going to have a look at some of the tools. So if you have your laptop, you're going to open the browser, and then we are going to be going through some simple demos. So these are mostly the tools. We have MX Toolbox. I believe some of you might have heard of it. And for those who hadn't, you're going to see how it works and you will appreciate its work, really. We have GTmetrix. This is a tool which we mostly use to get understanding of the performance of our website. It gives rankings, and on top of the rankings, it gives you the reasons as to why you're ranked as high or as low as you mark. URL scan, that one is mostly used to understand the technology which are making the website, and then it also enables us to understand the expiry for our SSLs. When are they due? Are they already expired? When will they renew? The stuff like that. And then we also have Lighthouse. Lighthouse is a plugin which we commonly use with browsers. We install the plugin in the browser, and then we load that particular website that we want, and we allow this plugin to analyze. It does the analysis, then it returns the performance of that website. How does it perform? In terms of SEO, when we talk of SEO, we are looking at search engine optimization. This is what enables your website to be easily accessible whenever people Google, so that they can easily find the content on your website. It also takes us through the best practices. What are some of the security things that need to be rectified on that particular website? So we're going to see Lighthouse as well. And then we shall be looking at a sample case of a Looking Glass and how it works. With Looking Glass, we are mostly testing connectivity. We have had incidents whereby a person says, okay, I'm here, but I'm not able to access my website, which is hosted aside. So now this is the part where you need to test. If I was away from the ring network, would I have been able to access this website? So that is where Looking Glass is helping us to test the connectivity away from our network. Like if I'm away from my network, am I able to still access my machine? That kind of test. Then we have the Who Is tool. This one also enables us to understand the expiry. When was it registered? When is it expiring? The stuff of that kind. Okay, so you can confirm if you're able to see my screen. I'm going to be looking at a case where we have some of the tools. I think we can start with GTmetrix. I'm in my browser. Let me see here. Be able to see. I hope everyone is able to see. Okay, GTmetrix. You can put GTmetrix in your browser. I am using Chrome in this case. You go to GTmetrix.com. I hope you're able to see my screen. So now for this particular part, I'm going to put bbc.com. I'm like, test my site. So this tool goes ahead to visit that particular website or that particular, it can be a web application. Remember when we talk about a website, we are looking at web-based applications, anything you can access through the browser. If it is on a public IP and it has a domain, maybe you can use that domain to access it. You get an understanding of its performance. You get to know what is the reason for its slowness, stuff of that kind. So you see how the analysis goes on, and one of the tools this tool is using in the background is Lighthouse. Remember we mentioned that we're going to use Lighthouse to see how Lighthouse actually works. It is one of the things we were considering. So this is what we have. Let me close this one here. So this is what we have. So they are saying this is the latest performance report for bbc.com. Now the test server which was used for this particular test is in Vancouver, Canada. So it means that, of course, you can account for latency to be part of the package, which is coming in for this case. So you find that the grade is you see for this one, and they're saying the performance is at 78%. The structure, we're looking at what makes that website. So when you come down here, you'll be able to, when you come under performance, they'll be showing you the reasons for that particular mark. The speed, the blocking time, maybe content, loading, redirection duration, the connection duration, stuff like this. How much time it takes for the website to fully load. So they give you those particular reasons. And then for the structure now shows you what is making up the website and the impact those particular technologies are having on the performance of the website. For example, now here they're saying avoid unloading event listeners, which means for this particular website, maybe event listeners are being used. And when you click on the drop down at that particular point, they will be showing you there is an option which is like learn how to improve this. So you just follow this link and then they show you, and then they show you how you can improve that particular feature to ensure that maybe you improve on the speed of the website. So there are very many other things which you can look out for. Okay, so at the same time, if you look on the right here, this side, there is an option which says retest. You can click on retest and put another URL to test, or you can put compare. So when we put compare is asking us to analyze two different websites and see how is our website's performance in relation to this other website. So let me try to put, I think youtube.com here. And see if this one can come through as fast as we can. So they're adding the job to the queue. So this is one of the tools which can be used. Now, basically here you're looking at the web application. If it is so slow, you're trying to check what is the reason for being slow. And then we can have, let me try to get us another tab here. Okay, this thing is covering my tabs. Let me first narrow this browser. Get it here. Okay, this thing can move. Right. So I'm going to have URL scan. So you can load it in your browser. Load it in your browser and try to move this thing away. Okay. All right, I'm looking for, okay. Okay, so we can come to urlscan.io here. So of course here I'll also try to use the same bbc.com. Then we come here and we tell it to run a public scan on bbc.com. So let us see. All right, so this one is back in the meanwhile. So now what we're seeing is bbc.com and youtube.com. So this one is the comparison. So they are showing you, okay, this person is having a grade C in terms of performance, or the general grade as per GT metrics, and then YouTube has about this. So this just helps you to compare and contrast and say, okay, so this website is maybe performing better than mine, or my website is performing better than this one in this particular aspect. So it gives you a vision on a visualization, maybe I could say, on where you need to improve. Is it the JavaScript which is utilizing most of the space? Is it CSS? So it gives you an understanding. It also advises, like we mentioned, when you come to structure, when you come to performance, okay, this is the comparison one. When you come to performance for when it is a single one, you're able to know what the reason for the score and what is affecting the score. Then they advise you on how you can proceed to have that aligned or sorted. So I'm going to go to URL scan.io. I ran the same scan for bbc.com. So when you come to bbc.com, you can move down, and down here they will be showing you the IPs. And then I can move to the IP detail. The IP detail shows you maybe probably which side the IP is behind that particular domain. Then here you get the related domains. Like whenever I wrote bbc.com, what are the related domains behind? You find that there's bbci.co, bbc whatever.uk, and maybe even those others which are serving the static files, the CSS and JavaScript. This is the domain tree, which is also kind of related to the domains behind the same. The links, which are still also linked to that particular domain, you load it. Now it has this particular part for the certificates. So for the certificates, now we do focus on, of course, the domain we are interested in. If it is for a particular domain, you will be seeing other domains which are related to it, but then you're interested in that particular one. For example, when you look at bbc.com, so we're able to know that this certificate is to expire probably on the 5th of April, I guess. I guess that is how it is, 5th of April, 2023, something like that. So this gives you, now this is the part where you're able to understand the domain expiry for your particular domain. You're able to know how much time is left for that particular, for that particular certificate. This one is for certificates, not the domain. For that particular certificate, with the certificate you're looking at, SSL certificates. So you know when that particular certificate will be expiring. Yeah, mostly that is it. Of course, it has other features, but as per our discussion, those are the things which are most interesting. Then the other tool we can look at, we had mentioned, let me see, we've seen how Metrics works. Okay, let us look at Lighthouse. So with Lighthouse, this is the one thing I want you to first do. You first run install Lighthouse plugin in Chrome. Can be Chrome, it can be Firefox. Depends on which browser you're using. So you can go to any of them. In mine, it is already installed. So Lighthouse for Chrome. When you click on it, you come under extensions. Oh, I think I'm using a different browser. So they're telling me to add it to Chrome. So I can add it here. So I'm telling them to add that one. So with that done, I'll come. So now we load. When we have Lighthouse as a plugin added, we can load bbc.com in the browser. So you wait for it to fully load. After it has loaded, you're going to right click. When you right click, we select the option for inspect. Inspect. Let me see here. I hope everyone is able to see my screen. So when I click on inspect, I have at the top here, there is elements, console, sources, network, there is stuff for performance, memory, application. So after security, you click on these double arrows because that is where they list everything. Now there is Lighthouse. So you select Lighthouse. Did I select Lighthouse? Okay. So after selecting Lighthouse, you tell Lighthouse to analyze that particular page. So it starts the analysis. From the analysis, you will see that it focuses on a number of things. From my screen, it does an analysis whereby it is imitating access from a mobile device. How would access be if a user is using a mobile device in that case? So that is what it is accessing. It looks at how it would be as a website as well. And then after doing that, it finally shares a report. So if you're able to see my screen, so this is what we have from
Let me try to. So this is what we have. They are telling us that for this particular website, bbc.com, the performance is rated at 26, and we have 26%. These are percentages actually. And then we have accessibility to the website is at 94. Now we have parts for best practice. So it means for your particular website, of course, you will focus on the areas where you're not doing well. Maybe even for these other areas where you want to get 100, you can check them out to understand why you're not hitting 100. So for this case, I'll just go to best practices. You click on it. Once you click on it, they will tell you what is going on. Trust and safety, they're saying it is including front-end JavaScript libraries with known security vulnerabilities. So this can help you to understand what are the vulnerabilities and how can I solve them. Ensure that CSP is effective against XSS attacks. So that is one of the major things. Of course, under SEO, they explain to you what you have not done right, maybe to reach 100. They can give you, I want to go to performance. Under performance, they give you the reasons for maybe that performance they gave you. So they are like the first content loads after 3.3 seconds. That is usually big for a website. And this can also, remember, this can also be affected with the latencies. Where is the testing server based? And that's one of the things which can affect it. So now they give you reasons as to why maybe the performance is as per their score. Largest content falls where there is an image which is taking long to load. You need to reduce the unused JavaScript within your site, minify JavaScript. So they advise on what needs to be done in order to solve that particular issue. So for this, remember, we are basically focusing on web-based applications. So I think the other thing which we can consider, I'm trying to, we've seen URL scan, we've seen that the who is. In Uganda, we have I3C as the main registry for the .ug domain. So with I3C, we use whois.co.ug is what you use. Now, this is a check mostly used for domains that are ending in .ug. So for example, let me see, what could I have? What can I test with? All right, so we can say renu.sc.ug. So when we load Renu, this is what we're going to have. So they will be able to tell me, okay, the name of this domain is this one, and the status is active, the registration date is this one, and this is the expiry date. So this is how important it is. So remember, we said we can use urlscan.io when you come under the section for certs. It makes you understand the period when your certificates will expire, the SSL certificates. But then you can use whois.co.ug to know when your domain will expire. So like we said, this helps you to prepare. If it is maybe budgetary terms, because I find that most institutions do prepare their budgets before they enter particular year, you need to have these things already included in a budget. So that's one of the things that you need to look out for. And then I think these are mostly the tools you can use when it comes to web-based applications. You can check for domain expiry. Maybe the other thing is testing for connectivity. We mentioned that we can use, we gave an example. Let me see, we can use Looking Glass to do the test. Let us just try to run something here. Looking Glass. And today, so if you search for Looking Glass entity in your browser, you can go to the first link, which shows up. On loading that link, of course, they give you some things, the terms of use. Of course, you need to come and agree to the terms and conditions. After that, you can later submit. You can later submit your request after that. So we come to this part. Now, for this particular part, you can select. Now, remember, in this case, we want to test connectivity. So the connectivity we want to test is away from our home institution, or away from our network. So I'm like, okay, let me try to use a server from Chicago, maybe. And which kind of query do you want to send? In this particular scenario, we're looking at a ping. It can be a trace route. It can be a ping. So we're looking at a ping. So for a ping, we come and specify the domain. So you're like, okay, I want to go to bbc.com, and literally pinging the IPv4 version of that domain. So you submit your query. It goes on to do its work. And after that, it will show you. So now this is able, for example, if you're not able to access google.com from within your internet, your internal network, you run this ping, and once you see that outside your network, it is accessible, then you reach out to your service provider and you're like, okay, what is going on? Outside, I can access this, but internally, I can't. So it means then that is how the troubleshooting now starts. You've already tested outside and you know it is not. It could be your website, outside on our side, and you're like, okay, I can't access my website on the RENU network, or I can't access it, it is completely off. This can help you to first run a test. For example, you say, well, you can say that this is renu.ac.ug. I'm going to run this ping from Palo Alto, and also I'll focus on that IPv4, run submitting my ping request. So I wait for the results. So if I'm not able to access my domain internally on my network, I try to test, is it reachable away from my network? Because this will help me to know that, oh, the website is up and running, but it is probably an internal issue or local issue which needs to be sorted for me to gain access again. So this shows us that it has sent 5 packets, and from these 5 packets, the success rate was at 100, because all 5 were received. So that is how now you can test for connectivity part. Okay, now finally, I think we're going to look at MX Toolbox. You can search MX Toolbox, and then we shall be taking the very first link, which shows up after our search from the search results. And now this is how MX Toolbox looks like. So remember, we mentioned the part where we say that mail servers can have a number of issues. Mail servers can be not sending, maybe they are no longer sending to Gmail, they are no longer sending to Yahoo. A number of reasons can be behind that. So now what we tend to do with this tool is the first option for MX Lookup. MX Lookup helps to identify the name servers for that particular domain. For example, you could be saying, okay, within my institution, we have 2 name servers. Sorry, we have 2 mail servers. And these particular mail servers are the ones responsible for sending out email on behalf of my institution. So what we do is you come to this tool. You go to the MX Lookup. MX, when we say MX, we are looking at mail exchange. So it checks for the email records or the email servers for the domain you put here. I'm going to put bbc.com. So I tell them to look up the MX records. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find the mail servers allowed to send email on behalf of BBC. So if it is your domain, it means once you come here and the host names showed here are not any of the mail servers you're mentioning, then it means that the DNS records on your side have an issue. The mail servers are not being published to the public, so they are not visible. So after that, you can come down and see. Remember, we mentioned that there are some policies or configurations of mail servers that we consider basic. These are, baselines. These are literally DNS records. And one of them is what they call the DMARC record. I think if we ever have a webinar maybe called literally concerning email security, we shall go in details of what each of those particular records does. So for this particular case, after knowing, okay, that my host names or my mail servers are visible to the public, I can run a blacklist check for these particular mail servers. I'm like, the blacklist check is trying to check my blacklisted, because whenever I talk about blacklist, it is a big database There are actually very many databases, and these databases are used to identify email servers that have been noticed to be sending what we could call malicious, maybe spam. So for these particular ones, you can go to blacklist check. This can give you information on whether that particular or any of those mail servers is blacklisted. And it is a very big list. They check all of them. If you see anything blacklisted, that means now you need to follow up on that. There are other sections like email health. You put the IP address of your mail server, and then you run to check for the health of the mail server. All right, so that marks the end of the presentation. I hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Daniel. This was a very, very insightful and well presented discussion. I would like to have, in case there is, in case of any questions, please share, and in case you want to, just a few people to share experience or any questions and you want to speak to us, we shall open up the floor and the mic to just a few people to have a discussion open to you. But before we open these lines, I want to believe that the purpose of this webinar and all these other engagements is really to put you in the driving seat. You have resources, you have servers, you have a network and infrastructure, and you ought to have the power within your hands to manage these resources. So as Daniel has explained, especially talked about services around email, around cloud and any other servers and services and websites. These are basic services that we believe make a difference for our institutions. And yesterday as well, we talked about EduRoam and especially through wireless engagements. So these engagements are intended to put you in the driving seat to give a few pointers in how you can handle your own resources. So he has as well shared a few tools that I believe that if you can explore, you will be able to show cause to either performance of your websites, performance of your own services, and things like that. So there is a question from Shahali. He says, where should we find the recordings? The recordings will be, I believe you registered, and of course we have your email address. So we shall share the recordings and the presentation as well after this discussion. So in case of anything, Daniel from Lira University, this is Daniel Kauma, okay. Daniel is sharing a link to all the tools that he has been talking about. In case you have, maybe you weren't following closely, in case you missed out any tool, he has shared the links to in the chat room. So, any questions? If there are no questions, then we shall proceed to the next part of the discussion, which is bandwidth management. So do we have any questions? All right, we don't see any questions. So I'll share my screen as well and now open the discussion onto managing one of the most critical resources that we have, which is bandwidth. Kanan Migade, I think he's from Bugema University. Can you please Okay, Canon, do you want to ask the question physically or in the chat room? Canon, you can speak. I have allowed you to speak. You can unmute and speak to us. Okay, Canon says, in case I want to boost the reach of my website. Daniel, do you have anything regarding that?
Hannah, you may try maybe to actually elaborate more on when you say you want to adjust to boost the reach of your website. Is it in terms of access? Is it in terms of how it appears in search engines when people search? Could you maybe unmute, I don't know, and try to give. Okay. So it's saying like if I want to attract more traffic to the website. Okay, in most cases, it depends on the purpose the website is serving. It could be if it is only in an institutional website, which is meant to render information to students within the institution or members, employees, staff of the organization, that can be different. It could be a website wherever you want people maybe from different, even those of the African continent to be able to access it. Then that means you need to find a way of pushing your reach beyond the website level. For example, you can find that you have social media platforms, you have WhatsApp groups aside, you have Facebook, or you have Twitter, you have Instagram. You go ahead and wherever you may be putting a post, you can put a comment. You can call it a comment or a hyperlink, and you're telling people for more information, maybe visit this website. You put just a snippet, and then you're like more details are found on the website. So I think that is one of the ways you can direct people more towards your site so that they can find that particular information. I don't know if that was really the question, but I hope I've answered it.
Thank you, Daniel. There is a message from Sandra. Daniel, thank you for the presentation. It is vital to keep checking on the domain name. We once had an ugly experience with the domain issue. Thanks to the RENU team for assisting us. I call upon my fellow colleagues not to hesitate to ask for help from RENU. Thank you, Sandra, and thank you for that feedback. Gift is saying, kindly give some light on key indicators of attack suspicion. Gift from MIU.
Can you hear me? Yes, so Gifting, when you look at, if we are looking at an attack problem in web-based applications, in most cases, everything starts with you may not get the symptoms as early as possible, but the signs could be the key indicators. You'll find that this particular website, of course, for some, the performance may degrade as a symptom. It may not be really key, it may be any other reason, but then there are some things which become obvious. You find that when you click on a particular link, all of a sudden you are redirected to some weird website. You get the point? So that is one of the reasons to show you, okay, that something is not right here. You go onto your admin panel for that particular site, WordPress, Joomla, or Drupal, whatever it is. You go in, you try to punch in the admin credentials, the ones you have always used, and all of a sudden they are no longer working. It could be that maybe the database has been compromised and the data has been corrupted. So those are some of the things you may look out for. If it starts misbehaving and acting differently, it means you need to act as soon as possible and check what could have gone wrong. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Daniel. And I think these are the questions that we have at this moment. So let us channel our minds into bandwidth management as a resource and a critical resource at that for our institutions. So allow me to share my screen. I want to believe you can see my screen. Okay, we'll just run through a few things around bandwidth management. This is a very big topic, but I just wanted us to have a small discussion on especially the considerations around this and how really do we know that this is the bandwidth that we need, how much capacity does an institution need to serve the need of the users. Unfortunately, we have a challenge of budget constraints, so we never usually have enough, especially when it comes to internet capacity. We never have enough to actually serve our institutions. But in that event, how do we manage the little that we have? And then we shall talk about a little about policy and a service that we have and that helps institutions, especially with managing their own bandwidth, and a few questions thereafter. So just a small definition on especially terms as bandwidth, throughput, latency. So some of these bandwidth and throughput are nearly close to each other, but the definition is they are not the same people, but possibly we can say they are siblings, you know. So just as defined here, bandwidth is how much data can possibly travel in a network at a given point in time. So you have a link, right? So in that link has a particular capacity. So let's say it is able to transmit, say, 5 Mbps at a given time. So that is the limit. But that doesn't mean that at any one time, it will let in 5 Mbps. It can let in 3 or 2 or even nothing. So bandwidth, therefore, is how much data can possibly travel. And this is just a small definition and a basic definition, a layman's definition. And then throughput refers to how much data actually, how much data transfers are done in a given time. So the difference, I think, is clear here that for bandwidth, it's how much capacity are you able to go up to. Then throughput is how much you are doing at a particular time. So, of course, these are coupled with a term called latency, which usually refers to the speed at which data travels across a network. So from a particular host to a destination. So if you're doing the transfer, how fast are you able to do that? So in what is the short period of time that you can do that transfer? So I think we have as well a term called bandwidth management, which is a term that describes basic techniques and some technologies and tools. And then we add in a term called policy that an organization can employ to most efficiently use the bandwidth resource. So the aim of this bandwidth management, if it is a strategy or something like that, is to improve performance of an internet connection, especially to be able to serve the users in the institution. So the goal really is to have just the right amount of bandwidth and in the right places at the right time and to the right users. So you, for example, could subscribe for say 100 Mbps. But how does UCU allocate that capacity? Is it just a general pool that anyone can access and have exactly the same rights to this 100 Mbps as, say, a server or anything else? So, yes, we want to see some prerequisites to bandwidth management. So we see how much content, how much content are we, for example, required to transmit, or what transactions are you able to do and in which type of format, at a similar or at a particular time. Then as a prerequisite to this discussion, we look at the network design and network management. The example that I used of UCU having subscribing for a total of 100 Mbps, but it is a general pool for anyone and everyone. So there is no management at that point. So that means that anyone that plugs onto the network and goes onto the network will be able actually to hit the maximum. That means you have 1, 2, 3 serious users and they'll actually constrain the entire network. So we look at network design as a prerequisite to bandwidth management. Then policy. It is important that I want to believe that all these institutions and universities have network policy and ICT policies and all those things, acceptable user policies. So in those policies, we should actually add the definitions, especially around bandwidth management. And maybe if you're inquisitive enough, you can find online some, especially universities, that have their own policies and particular clauses that stipulate bandwidth management. Then user education. So how much and how able are your users to actually understand that this is a critical resource for starters, and then which kind of measures are on ground to let them know that, for example, if we have a constraint, then at particular times of the day, users can, I should say, not be downloading movies, say, during work hours or something like that, and yet they have time in the evening or something like that. So just as an engagement, sensitization is key, especially on letting our users know that, hey, we have this particular resource, it is a scarce resource, and we ought to protect and use it efficiently. So this slide shows you, this is derived from a recent survey by a consultancy here in Uganda. It showed you in brief the particular bandwidth requirements, per student for particular resources. So for anyone, say, access to educational resources, 1 Mbps is enough. A learning management system, 1 Mbps is enough. Online content, libraries, and things like that. For streaming, and there the discussion changes. And maybe in the next slide, we shall talk about that as well. Remote instruction, video conferencing, and downloads, file downloads, and things like that, labs and online laboratories. So all this is just based on their research, and this, of course, things change over time. So one of the things that in this discussion is that we we have things that have changed. So in this slide, we just call this market trends. So things have really changed and changed very fast. I think recently, in the previous few days or so, the world celebrated the 8 billion human that was born. So if we are at 8 billion, of course, things have changed and things have grown. Then the booming market of smart devices and all these hungry, let me say, bandwidth hungry devices has changed the narrative. That if, for example, Daniel Okalo started working in Lira University 5 years ago, he has possibly seen a shift in the types of devices that the students have in campus. That previously, say 5 years ago, people were okay with having a small device with, even those devices we call capability. But right now, people have very, very smart devices, and they are very, very hungry, power hungry, data hungry. So right now, I think this is a Cisco report, internet report, that says by 2022, 82% of the global internet traffic will come from video. So this means that of your entire internet traffic, the internet traffic of Lira University of Ebenezer, possibly over 80% of that traffic is video. So what does that mean? If you dig down into understanding the kind of profiles and the kind of video people actually download or watch, people do stream all the time. And I can't really lecture you or preach to you enough that students, even if they're attending lectures, sometimes they have headsets on and they're actually watching a movie or streaming something. And what is interesting is that they don't just stream low quality video. They will stream very high quality video as long as the network permits it. So you see that maybe there is an online lab going on and you practically need 15 Mbps to learn, to have that session run smoothly. But there is a student or students in class that actually streaming and using that very internet to, run things that we can say are low priority at the moment. So as you can see, this is just a still from that report. You can see for standard definition video, a single stream from a TV set is about 2 Mbps. Then high definition is from 5 to 7.2. From ultra high definition, it's over 15 Mbps. So that means that just having a smart TV, at home or in the university, and if you have a couple of them, then you have to part with this type of capacity. So the narrative has changed, the world is growing and things have changed, that even a website that would be very light, has all these additions and let's say bandwidth hungry applications attached to it. So yes, the challenge with management and why we actually need to manage our bandwidth is that we have an increased number of users, and these users are not just ordinary users, but they are first of all elite users, and so they have bandwidth hungry applications that are running. But then we have challenges, because we have an open internet. The open internet demands or allows us and exposes us to malware, to commercial or uncommercial, any sorts of ads, spam. viruses and all those things. And those things come in as very attractive videos and hyperlinks and all. Then, of course, downloads are everywhere. Social media is everywhere. It is very rare to find female students or, you know, not doing Snapchat or those things. Then the consideration here and the challenge is that how much monitoring do we really need? You know, how much monitoring, and when we do monitor adequately, how many users you have on the network, what they are doing, and when you actually, if you actually are successful in doing that kind of monitoring, what do you do at the end? You know, given that even if we have budget constraints and limitations to say, I have my budgets, say, allowing me or only limiting my abilities to 100 Mbps, what, you know, even if your users actually have proved that they need 300. So these resources are there, but then as well as a team, as an individual, do you have the technical ability, as we said, to monitor your network and know that these streams are actually BitTorrent streams. These streams are actually video streams. These streams are, you know, these flows, for example, are social media, these flows, things like that. Of course, what we go through all the time and maybe everywhere is that we have frustrations over slow internet speeds. You know, we have packet losses everywhere, calls that drop, either meetings or video streams or, you know, buffering video, web pages not loading or actually taking too long, and maybe we may not even be able to access remote servers or services because the resource is actually now constrained that it can't handle. And then, of course, retransmits, because these applications, either TCP with the TCP protocol, so that means that the stream or the flow has, you know, the end-to-end and three-way handshake. So it, until it actually does those three handshakes, it has to be able to complete that. That means it will retransmit, and what you feed on the end is the slowness or the packet losses or something like that. So in this graphic, for example, we want to see exactly what consumes your bandwidth as an institution. You know? So these are things that maybe we may not really have time, all the resources, all the equipment, but it is something that we ought to do as a team, to actually give time and resources into understanding our traffic profiles. You know, as we have talked about the explosive growth of users on the network, and at that, devices. Some users have 2 phones, smartphones, and laptops. So, you know, they want to do upgrades or software updates with the same critical resource and scarce resource you have. You, as well as the team, may not have scheduled your backups, so you want to do backup all the time. You know, so video streaming and all those things, you can't really limit everything on the network. And when you do, of course, students are very wise and they'll find a way to bypass this. Then we talked about peer-to-peer applications, especially maybe the common one is BitTorrent. So here you can see this is one graphic on showing you just 7.2% of the traffic of this IP address that we put in one of our tools actually showed it has 7.2% BitTorrent. I don't know. The question would be that would you need BitTorrents or torrents or torrenting in your network? And if you do, you have, do you know what exactly is going through those streams? As you have all the other traffic profiles broken down, So as we look at the challenges that we have seen, and we can look at the considerations, So first of all, we talk about network design. It is very, very important to have your network designed in an enabling way, to have control. Say this VLAN is for, I think one thing yesterday someone mentioned about when users come in and things like that. You can have the VLAN for users, and of course limit how much capacity, for example, you want to allocate to your users, but most importantly, after realizing that you have this scarce resource and all that, it's not really enough. Do you really plan to upgrade your capacity? Which mechanisms are you or can you employ to sensitize your users, especially on the use of the resources, and avoid traffic that would actually be wasted to after users click, especially on security, in security related ways, to click onto attractive things that expose them to malware and such viruses and ads. Then, of course, capacity-hungry applications, which you can't do much about. Then we said scheduling your backups, right? If you have your servers here in your institution, and then they have to do periodic backups. What time do you want to do, or should you be doing the backups? Maybe your server is in cloud that is outside the country. When would you, what would be the best time to upgrade, to do the backups? Do you want to do the backups at midnight when everyone is in bed, or at midday when everyone is working? Then we talked about capacity allocation, which I think is a key thing, and a key, you know how to segment your network. And then it's important that you know that the users, say on the staff VLAN, have this ability and should be able to do this much capacity as a proportion of what we have as an institution. What about the students? What about the administration? What about our servers? Such that you can easily control usability in that regard. Then equipment considerations. Some of us have challenges, especially with equipment. I think we can talk about that later as well. And then we say that it is very, very important to know your network. So how do you know your network? Especially investing time into monitoring and management of your very network, and designing your campus network in a way that is scalable and is manageable. Then, of course, user policies. So you set up your policies and say your users should be able to adhere to them and be able to play within your confines. So I think we can, this has been discussed as well. So for equipment, really, this is a slide showing you, just a picture showing you a Cisco 2900 series, giving you up to 75 Mbps. So that means that an institution, for example, an institution X, subscribing for 50 Mbps, and RENU, in case you have, say, you want to establish your bandwidth requirements, you can request for a boost and say, let us have our capacity boosted for a short time, for a few days, and see how much capacity we can hit. And then you realize that, hey, the team tells you that, hey, we shall upgrade your capacity or boost your capacity up to 100 Mbps. But then you actually realize that 75 is where you can stop. So these guys lied to me. But then can you check on your data sheets and the data sheet of your router to see if actually it can support that much capacity? So as well, links. So if you look at the links that you have, of course, these links are not the same. Wireless links may not be performing, especially having the same capacity as optic fiber links or copper. But then what is key is that the maximum throughput between any two nodes is determined by the slowest link on the network or between the nodes. So between, for example, this graph, your computer is connected to a 1 Gbps copper link. Your access switch to the edge router is 1 Gbps, but the edge router to the core router is 100 Mbps. So even if you are connected behind a 1 Gbps link, as long as this connection between the edge and the core is 100, then that means that all you can do, for example, from the computer to the border router, or for example, to the internet, will do up to 100 Mbps. And these considerations, in case you know your network, you ought to dig down and understand that. So sometimes when we are faced with these challenges of, say, congestion, poor performance, oftentimes we take very desperate measures, you know. At RENU, we have a graphic that and a saying that in case someone takes on a very big measure, you know, to solve a problem, we say you're using a gun to kill a rat. So you see, some people actually will say, let me isolate, because the finance team is frustrated with the service. They'll disconnect the entire, you know, university and connect on the finance people. Sometimes you prioritize and say, hey, let me actually segment my network, but give the administration 50% of the traffic that we actually get, and then the rest of the people. So even if it is not really proportional to the number of users and the needs, but because maybe the administration has, you know, their way with you, so you'll actually be cornered into thinking that you can allocate them the 50 Mbps and the rest of the people get 50. So depending really on the circumstances, we have realized that several institutions take very desperate measures. Sometimes people put in, especially in their firewalls, very, very stringent access control lists or rules, and very stringent rules, firewall rules. And actually this ends up impacting on them, on their performance, especially when you have so many rules, and you know, it actually affects the overall performance of the entire network. So what would be important here is to have maybe bandwidth groups, especially to say, okay, after studying, you know, this won't be really a desperate measure, because it is just after studying the needs of your parts of the network. And then you say, okay, these are 5 people, this is what they do per day, so they can be fine when you give them 5 Mbps. These ones are 30, you can give them 7. These ones are, so something like that. Then bandwidth throttling, that is not really, but it's done usually in firewalls, especially on there are particular people that choose to say that when your data volume has hit 2 GB in a particular day, then access to the internet will be revoked or something like that. or you'll be maintained at a very low speed network or something like that. So those are usually desperate measures. So as an informed, for example, engineer or network administrator, or we just think that as you monitor a network, it is very, very important to dedicate time to monitoring your network and knowing especially what are the abilities and what can you do to especially guarantee performance of your users. So first of all, as we said, bandwidth, do you know how many hosts you have? One, do you know which kind of protocols, you know? Do you know which profiles or applications they do? Google, you know, if they are doing YouTube or anything like that, if they're doing Telegram, they're doing any other kinds of protocols. Then how many sites or which sites particularly do they visit? You know, what are their kind of requests if you have access to your DNS servers and things like that. You have an email server and say you see 50% of your email is spam or whatever percentage bounced mails or things like that. So what do you do in that regard? You know, and how many critical services do you have? Your learning management system is hosted in-house. You know, it is within a pool that is with everyone else, or you know, with the other network, that the server network that has, say, very low capacity and things like that. So then especially the health and the system health and statistics, especially with your equipment, your routers and things like that. When the router is congested and it's not really performing well, it will now show you even when you have the capacity, you actually can't use it well because the router is congested. It is doing a lot of things. Some of us have access points that do DHCP, they do NAT, they do a lot of things, and the access point is very old. So we don't know how it is performing. Its memory is full of things like that. Yes, as someone who invests time into your network, how do you know which ports, especially if you know that there is a user that is using, or they're using the entire capacity of the building? Can you dig down to find the IP address of that user, or the MAC address, or which port they are connected to, which protocols exactly they're doing BitTorrents, or they're doing, you know, all these statistics. So they help you into decision making. And then which tools can you employ? You know, are they affordable? Can they offer very insightful graphs, and they are actually easy to configure and manage, and friendly and rich with statistics? Are they free? You know, can they keep the data for a long time for reference and things like that? So there are several tools that you can use, especially around monitoring bandwidth, especially on the real-time realm. We have Zabbix, Cacti, and all those things. But then there are other tools that we may be particular to look at to see where am I congesting, or where am I facing congestion, where am I having which protocols actually going through my network. NTOP is one of the key tools that you can employ, or NFSN employ, to actually dig through and see, hey, all right, this user is using all the capacity, but what exactly are they doing? What are their traffic profiles? So you see the user is actually using that much capacity, but maybe what they are doing is legitimate, or what they are doing is costing us and causing problems. So this is just a graphic of an image taken some time back. We have the tool called is Ping Plotter, and we were trying to test the performance of a particular user. particular institution. So when they were doing, as you can see, the tests ran and ran up to Hope 6. So Hope 6, if you see on the right, packet loss before Hope 6 was 0. No packet loss at all. Average round trip time was friendly. And when it gets to Hope 6, then we see packet loss of 8.4%. So it turns out, as we can see here, that from that point where this user actually leaves the RENU network, the user is flatlining or using all their capacity. So that means that whatever they want to do beyond the subscribed capacity is now being dropped or queued to wait for, to provide space for what is actually run through the network. So we have this sort of tools, for example, ping plotter, to help you run. And these are the tools that we usually ask, especially when people say the performance is not good. So looking at this tool, you can really see that the performance of this institution is okay, in the RENU backbone is okay, but when it gets now to exit RENU, it now begins to flatline because they are using all their subscribed capacity. So after really looking at understanding your network and designing mechanisms to understand and profile your network, and of course, as a technical person, you can see how to really manage your bandwidth and allocate particular resources to the right people. Now, the other important bit is your network policy. So do you know how many users you have? You know, are they doing appropriate downloads, if any? Are they doing particular profiles? Do you need to, if you have the policy, you know, do you have a written policy? If you do, is it updated? You know, is it so something like that? And the users, are they aware of the policy? And can you ask, for example, a student and ask them, for example, they are doing torrents, you know, are they aware that they are not supposed to do them? Because at some point in university, some things are implemented and no one really is aware, but because they are students and they're inquisitive, they'll find a way to circumvent your policies. But even if you found a student downloading or using torrents, and maybe they actually don't know, so what do you do, and what does the policy say in that regard? So just maybe this is a bigger topic as well. If we may not really have the time to go through how to build your policy and what should be involved in there. But I want to believe that most of the institutions have an ICT policy where all these clauses define particular responsibilities. So, of course, a good policy should have a purpose and particular objectives and ownership. For example, you can say the ICT department owns the policy, or the university or the directorate of ICT in the university. And it should be very clear and precise. Should have particular confines on who does what. So what is the responsibility of a student, responsibility of a network engineer, and that of the director, and that of the principal or the chancellor or something like that. And then most importantly, are these policies actually adaptable and enforceable? So that is something that is a question to all of us. So we have particular good practices that we can just share together here. Maybe we also share, you can share in the chat room what you do, especially around bandwidth management. So of course, it is important to have user education and sensitization, and of course have eyes to the ground to understand the user needs, and then you should have particular network access control and authentication, because you are a public institution. That doesn't guarantee that anyone and everyone should just have access to your network and be able to log in and access resources or use the internet the way they wish. So then there should be a way to, because one of the proven challenges is with browsers. Sometimes you need to dedicate particular sessions to, in case the sites are manageable and the users are a manageable number, you need to dedicate some time to give some kind of sensitization on browser use and browsing as an important thing, where you need to either have ad blockers or kind of certain tools that help manage or run or fight malware or ads and things like that, because they contribute significantly to the kind of bandwidth that is run through your network. Then, of course, bandwidth managers and peer-to-peer clients and software. So that is something that, some institutions have gone ahead to block torrent and such software. So it depends on you. If you really need them and something like that, that is really up to you. Then a prioritization, especially on the essential services that you have. Then firewalls, that's a very big topic as well. So which firewalls do you need? Open source or proprietary hardware, or just software firewalls? And can you afford them? Do you know how to set them up, or things like that? Then proxies and web caches, that is something that you can explore as an institution to see, because caching helps, especially having, in case you have a way to avoid those redirects. There's some resource that people can really pick locally in the institution, that is a plus. Then, of course, email management. Most of the emails, or some of the emails that we get in our inboxes, are spam, and the users may not really differentiate a spam email from a real email. Some of them are very exciting. They tell you you have won an iPhone 14, or you have won $1 million or something like that. So what do you do when you see that email? You just rush to click and expose the network and things like that. And this, if you manage this, for example, email infrastructure very well, it can be, you can save over even 10% of the bandwidth that you have. So, of course, establish your bandwidth requirements. Like we said, you just need to know how much capacity you need, even if your budget maybe at the moment cannot allow you to do that, but at least you should know that, hey, if I increase this capacity to, say, by 50% or 100%, my users will be countable. So most of us run, so the question here is, how do you know how you're performing? You can use IPAF tests. IPAF 3 right now is the current version. And then speed test servers, persona tests as well. You just need to know exactly what you're testing and what it means, the results you're getting. I think previously we discussed how or what exactly a bandwidth test or speed test actually means, and what results should you expect. Some of us run speed tests when we are using all our capacity, and you run a speed test and it is showing you you have 0.3 Mbps download. Upload, you have 10 Mbps. So then you say, these RENU guys give me 0.3 Mbps. So you just need to know your current utilization, and then you actually run and have an informed decision on the kind of bandwidth, for example, you're using at the time. So Persona as a tool is a very important tool in especially analyzing such failures like we talked about. You have a link that's not performing well in your network, in your path. Persona can help you that way. You have a congested device. Sometimes we run these tests and we ask you to run the tests, and an institution is not flatlining, but they are performing poor. So when you run a Persona test, you see, hey, these guys actually capped themselves. Maybe at the firewall, the user is not supposed to exceed 10 Mbps or 3 Mbps per user. And then at maybe the same user actually wants to do more, and they're saying, hey, the bandwidth is there, but we can't even use it. So this tool helps us point to it, especially in regard to capacity and bandwidth. So we have particular deployments across the country in different parts of our POPs in Uganda. So in Arua, Buru, Mbali, Tebe, Mbarara, and in Kampala, we have different Persona tests. So you can run those tests and for example, test against, if you're in Entebbe, test against the Entebbe server and see how much capacity. So the capacity of the speed test server that Persona gives you is on the particular link. So it's within the REN network, so it's not on your particular capacity. So you run a speed test and it shows you, say, 100, 500 Mbps, So that's all right. Sorry. Yes, my device got a problem, but I think we can pick from here. I think we are about to conclude our session. So just as a conclusion, we have a tool and a service called application filtering as a service. So that service helps us to, especially, it's based on DNS, and some of you institutions have tested it. So it should be able to show you, your bandwidth, it should be able to allow you yes, I'm going to share my screen shortly. Give me a second, please. Sorry about that. I think we will be concluding in a few. So I think we can have a few questions here. I think there are some in the chat room, but we can have a few questions and then proceed. I think we are really about to close. But thank you very much for being attentive. I'll add something small to the service application filtering as a service, as a tool that has been used by the team to manage bandwidth, especially for some institutions, and take off sometimes it helps us filter traffic that's malware and things that the institution may not really require and benefit from. So this is where we are at. So I was saying that we have a tool called application filtering as a service, and this service has proven to work for most of the institutions that have taken it up. So it helps you manage your bandwidth resources in which way you take out what you don't really want as your traffic. So you can see that in this institution that signed up for the service, there are particular queries, and what is standing out is the percentage of what they block. So they block 53.1%. So if we went through to see especially what they are blocking or things like that, we may see that they are blocking ads, they are blocking, I think you can see domains on ad lists, they block ads, they block malware, they block pornographic content, they block several things that they think are not really necessary for them. So thank you very much for listening to me, and these are just some references. So let's have a few questions, and then we'll see. So Marion says, what persona test can those in Kabale use? I don't see it on the list of tests for various regions. I think people in Kabale can easily use the one in Barara. Yes, that will. You can use the one in Barara. Then Shahari, please, approximately how much bandwidth do I allocate given the number of clients I expect is 1,000. So really, bandwidth is a game of mathematics, if I can say. But for 1,000 users, you may need over 100 Mbps, depending on what you really want to do with the users or what you want to do. So if you have, because remember that if you have students or you have who are always in campus, remember we take in a factor where you have 1,000, but they're not simultaneous users. So there could be a time when they're all on campus. So maybe what could be a consideration is at any one time, what is the maximum number of users you can have at any one time? So depending on what they're doing, what applications you run, if you have several in-house tools and several in-house applications that may not require international bandwidth or bandwidth, internet bandwidth, then you may not really need, you may go below 100. But when you all need international bandwidth and all that, then it depends on what you want. So Abbas says, thanks for the great presentation. Then Fred says, is there any possibility to restrict users from accessing YouTube on my network from morning up to 2:30 p.m.? So yes, I think, Fred, we can interest you with the service application filtering, and then you see if it really can work for you. So it will show you, yes, the time that you can customize your filter. So you run your filter to say, hey, I want to block this domain, youtube.com, and maybe anything else related to youtube.com. And then it will, the filter will actually be applied, but for a particular time. That when you set it up at 8 a.m., that means the filter will run for those so many hours up to 2:30 or something like that. So this tool, in case you're interested, you can write to us. You can write to systems@renu.ac.ug and knock@renu.ac.ug, and then we shall get back to you on that. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so in the chat room, I think we have no more questions, and in the Q&A. So thank you very much for being part of this discussion, ladies and gentlemen. And I think if there is no other, Daniel, do you have any last words?
I don't really have words as per se, but what I can say is thank you so much for sparing time to come and show up for this. And we hope that at least what has been heard, what has been discussed has reached you to heart. You go try to put something up, maybe troubleshooting stuff, checklist, have a maintenance checklist. You know which tools you can use to test your network, test bandwidth stuff. So we're just hoping that at least you try to put this into practice. You have a network you're running, try to improve it, try to apply that knowledge and see the benefits, how you can now improve and start enjoying the internet or the bandwidth you get to its fullest. Yeah, that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you for being our facilitator. And thank you all for being part of this discussion. Surely we'll share with you the presentations and the recording of this discussion. So we'll share with you as well a survey, and a short survey at that, not more than 5 minutes, to, for example, give us feedback on how the webinar was and any suggestions on how what we can do to improve this for further engagement, and which topics you would wish to have shared in the next webinar series. Actually, the webinar this webinar is inspired, and this webinar is inspired by the suggestions for the topics that we had this time, campus wireless, bandwidth management, and these services webinar were after feedback from the previous survey. So please just know that we listen and we hear your suggestions. So please, in case you want to see something, a topic discussed in the next webinar, and surely we shall change the narrative and see how we be more engaging, and we can become more engaging in future webinars. So Donald says, don't we have don't we get a certificate after the webinar? I think we did not account for that in the preparations, but please also, we can consider that in the future engagements and plans. Donald, please also be aware that RENU runs a series of capacity building workshops and engagements, from direct engineering assistance to workshops, physical and virtual workshops, online and self-paced. So you just need to be alert and aware of these, especially when we begin communicating these, I think, early next year. So I want to believe that we shall be able to get feedback from you on this and any other engagements. So please expect to receive emails on the presentation and recording, and then we shall expect some feedback from you as well. So thank you all. Thank you, Jerry, for joining us. Thank you, Daniel Okaro. Thank you all. Yes, the survey will come as well. Yeah, so thank you very much and have a good Friday night.